Welcome to Beyond Rent, the property management podcast brought to you by Rent Manager. Each episode, we talk with industry experts about market trends and practical strategies for property management professionals. Now, let's get to the conversation and go Beyond Rent.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond Rent. Today we're joined by Conor from Rentable to dig into one of the most overlooked but operationally complex parts of property management, security deposits. We'll explore why the process is so challenging today, where teams run into risk, and what it looks like to rethink deposits as a more efficient and transparent experience for both operators and residents. Conor, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I think about security deposits a lot in my role because I've talked to a lot of companies that try to help out with security deposits, with Rentable being the primary one. So I do think about security deposits, but I know it's one of those areas that is operationally important, but can really be a challenge and have a lot of pitfalls and different areas that people just want to be able to do better. So I'm excited to learn more from you today. But before we get started, let's get to know you a little bit better. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Conor. I'm one of the co-founders of Rentable. I'm based in the Boston area. At Rentable, what we do is we offload the entire security deposit process for property managers across the country. And a lot of times, when we talk about Rentable, security deposits may not be the top of their mind. And they ask us, why security deposits? And really, it's kind of a personal thing that occurred to me and my co-founder, Alex, where we were renting in the Boston area. Pretty much shocked at how archaic the process was, needing to go to the bank, get a certified check, take the train downtown, drop it off at an office. And we were young guys who were used to Venmoing people for things and using different online tools. So that was one element that led us to think, hey, there has to be a better way to do this. And then personally, being involved in real estate via my family in the Boston area, I saw from their perspective as well, just how inefficient deposits were to handle, and also some of the liability that comes up with, handling deposits.
Yeah, it really is painful on both sides, right? And I think we'll talk a lot about that. And I appreciate your story because getting to do this podcast, there's lots of different ways people end up in our industry, and many of them are because it's family, right? You say you have some family that's involved in real estate, but many others had a very specific moment in time where they experienced something and they said, I think I can solve this, right? And it sounds like you kind of have both elements, which is really exciting because just because you understand the pain doesn't mean you understand the industry. And just because you understand the industry doesn't mean you understand the pain points and how to solve for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been a huge blessing for us, honestly, is just having a little bit of both perspectives. We know that it's a super industry, or rather person-to-person industry, right, where you need those relationships. And so having a little bit of that combined with some of the, renter perspective, I think has led to us being, able to be successful.
Absolutely. And we hear a lot about security deposits as it relates to the increased cost of renting and some of those. So let's jump in and let's learn more about security deposits. And let's start with the challenges, right? So why are security deposits still such a challenge for operators in this modern digital world that we live in?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that contribute to this. So one, which I touched on briefly, but the liability aspect to managing security deposits. Every state has its own guidelines for how you have to manage security deposit funds. It's kind of a unique transaction where you're taking money from someone, but it's not your money, it's their money that you hold on to for a period of time. And so each state has started to regulate differently how that money has to be handled. Even certain cities might have different rules from the state itself. And so that makes it very cumbersome just to keep track of how to do things. These laws are changing all the time. And then separately, I think, a lot of the transactions themselves are just done in old school ways. It's all check-based. The tenants are not quite tenants yet. So they're, prospects that are moving in. They have to pay with a check because a lot of people don't necessarily love the idea of taking ACH payments for these payments. Things like that contribute to it just being really difficult.
Yeah, there are a lot of elements, and I like that last part that you talked about with regards to how the payment comes in. Many people want some type of certified funds, right? A cashier's check, things like that. So there's no risk of those funds being pulled back or NSF, all of those things, that is a risk, right, for operators. Talk to me more about the liability piece for the property manager, because a lot of times people don't see it from that perspective unless you've experienced it. So explain more about what it looks like, because it seems like you're just moving money back and forth. Where would the liability really sit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, a lot of people, especially when we started the business, felt that way, right? It's just money we're holding. I put it in a savings account, right? Who cares? Ultimately, there are a lot of nuances to this. You have to open up trust accounts or escrow accounts. You have to track interest. Typically, you have to pay that out. There's different pieces of documentation you need to provide to the resident, letting them know where the money is, when can they expect it back. Each state has different refund timelines. So I'm in Massachusetts, it's 30 days, New York State, 14 days. It varies across the country. And so that contributes to, it being very difficult to handle this stuff. And if you make a mistake, you're liable to double, triple damages on a security deposit. We've seen class action lawsuits popping up across the country, large operators getting dinged millions of dollars potentially for, not signing a form. In Massachusetts, there was a large operator who didn't sign a deduction statement, which is required by Massachusetts law. And they were dinged, I think, over $1 million for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, right? So you don't want to have those issues. And you brought up a really interesting angle here, and it varies based on operator. But if you're working in multiple states or even counties, I guess, could have different rules. You are liable, you are responsible for understanding the different rules and regulations in each one of those areas. So if you're in multiple states, if you're in 4 or 5, maybe 10 different states, now you have all of these different rules and you have to have processes built around each one of them, right? And I'd imagine as you talk to operators, they probably have whole teams of people focused on this.
Yeah, 100%. They might talk to their legal counsel, once a month to deal with this stuff. Then they have their accountants dealing with cutting checks or reconciling accounts. We see it as basically we save about an hour per security deposit, which is, the time people are usually spending. So do the math on 1,000 apartments. That's 1,000 hours a year, which is, half a full-time person or something along those lines. So it does add up very quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. And let's talk more about the deposit compliance piece as well, because what I've noticed is it seems like regulations are changing faster, not slower, right? It seems like there's always an update. There's always a lot going on. We have partners in the payments world. We have partners in the screening world, and a lot of them share a similar sentiment that it's really hard to keep up with regulations. How are most property managers keeping up?
Some of them aren't. So that's one answer. I think the people that are very on top of it do have maybe inside counsel that they work with. Maybe they have someone on staff who literally tracks some of these new laws. A lot of it is peer-to-peer as well. So different, trade organizations or apartment associations might have a newsletter that goes out with updates. So I think it's kind of like a hodgepodge of ways of doing this. And that's contributing to why things can slip through the cracks. Because if I didn't get the newsletter from the Massachusetts Apartment Association this month, maybe I'm missing a key thing that no one on my team is monitoring. And that's really where we can come in and say, look, don't worry about it, right? This is an area of your business that you don't need to care about because Rentable is there and we have your back.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that I've always been impressed with, because it is easy to let those things kind of slide. Not all of these changes, because they are happening so quickly, are broadcast far and wide. So some of it you have to discover on your own, or at least be looking for it. And we've got some amazing trade associations that are helping with this, but even they can't handle all of it, right? So walk me through a little bit of what your team is seeing as far as how quickly are things changing as it relates to security deposits and how the funds are moved and held.
Yeah, it's hard to put a metric around this, right? We could look up how many laws are proposed, but these things are changing very dramatically post-COVID. We've seen that kind of be the catalyst for a lot of more pro-tenant legislation in most places. And I think that's because of the rising costs. So we've seen areas that are dictating you have to have payment plans on a security deposit or offer flexible options. A lot of that stems from the rising cost of housing. I think in general, just having more protections for tenants is the theme of the last few years, especially at the state level. And so we've seen, dozens of states instituting new laws in the last year or two, which I think far outstrips what it was for the prior decade, potentially.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'd agree. And you talked about flexibility and payment plans and things like that. That is something, I don't know exactly when it happened. I think it was maybe slightly before 2020. There was a lot of movement that way. I feel like it's been really picking up pace because depending on your area, depending on competition, deposits can be a lot of money in certain areas, right? And a lot of people don't have that available funds to make that happen. So there's been these other products that have come along to help out the industry. How is your solution coming alongside the PM and the resident to help out with that piece, right? Because it's great that you want to help out with the operational, collecting, holding, refunding, compliance piece, but what about the affordability side?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the origin story. When I was renting 5 years ago, when we started Rentable in Boston is notoriously expensive. You often have to come up with 3 or 4 months of rent up front. And, I was able to log on to Amazon and spread a payment out on a bicycle, but I couldn't spread a payment out on the biggest expense of my life, which is moving into a new apartment. I think that triggered basically this idea of a payment plan, a pseudo buy now, pay later type product for multifamily and, the rental landscape in general. And so what we do is we allow renters to spread their deposit payments out into monthly installments. So they're actually paying a portion of their deposit over 3, 6, or 12 months. They're effectively saving up a full deposit. And then if they renew, there's no more payments after that. If they leave after 1 year, they've actually saved up a full deposit. And I think that it's something that aligns the resident's behavior with the property manager very well because they have a refundable deposit that they want to get back. And then in addition to that, there's no additional fees for the resident. A big issue that we see is moving apartments. You're waiting on your last place to send you a deposit to pay the new one. We allow you to have that flexibility where once you get that old deposit, you could just pay off the payment plan and go on your way. And so we really like this model because it's very resident friendly and it aligns incentives with the property manager really well as well.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that there's been a lot of pro-tenant, tenant-friendly, resident-friendly legislation, regulations that have popped up. And one of the things I will comment on that is as those regulations come around, sometimes I get the sense that they're putting those regulations in place because our industry isn't friendly to residents, right? Where we work in this industry, and we actually know it's the complete opposite. When I talk to our customers or you talk to people in the industry, it is quite common for operators to say, I want to provide services that actually help my residents. I want things that are affordable for my residents. They're very, very pro-resident. I mean, they are the customer at the end of the day, right? So while these regulations are probably helpful in some areas, I am hearing that when it comes to affordability, the operator, the property management company, is on the same side as the resident. They want to make it flexible. They want to make it easy. However, there has to be some level of protection for the property manager, right? Because this is a real piece of property. There are real costs associated with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, the constant balancing act that people are, trying to walk the tightrope. Like, interestingly, we see things like how much you can charge in a deposit is a hotly debated thing on a state level because certain states limit it at 1 month's rent. Some states have no limit. And that's like a great example where the balancing comes in of affordability versus protection, because ultimately there are some cases where having a second month's rent would be really beneficial and allow actually more renters to come in the door because there's certain renters that you want that extra month of protection, for example, or certain assets where that might, make sense. So that's an area that we've seen a lot of legislation. Like, a lot of states are capping that at 1 month. And I think that's been an interesting, not dilemma people are in, but I think it's a talking point where property managers are trying to navigate, how do we let renters in if we only have 1 month now versus we used to charge 2 months in a deposit. So that's like an interesting example.
Yeah, that's a great example. So, and if you don't know all the details here, that's fine. But so if they are being limited to 1 month security deposit where they would prefer a 2 or 3 month deposit, I would have to think that they're tightening their requirements in other areas to live there, right? And I think that's what you're saying, right? So maybe you have a couple months security deposit and maybe other pieces of your life just aren't quite ready, right? That you'd be able to move in there historically, but now they're looking for a higher credit score. Or they're looking for other elements that maybe you don't have in place yet.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. Like, an interesting example of somewhat related to this is Chicago. So Chicago operators, property managers, for the most part, they don't collect security deposits. because the laws became very difficult there. So they moved towards move-in fees. Now, move-in fees were legislated they have to now be lower than they were previously. So we've actually had a number of customers who are bringing deposits back. And so that just illustrates the dynamic that exists between the property manager and the legislation.
Yeah, that is another really great example because what I'm hearing is there's a certain level of risk that the property manager has to deal with, and they can slice it up a number of different ways, but the risk doesn't go away. So they need upfront funds or they need a deposit. They have to have one or the other, a little bit of both to make it work. And I do think, going back to kind of what we're talking about on the security deposit management side, I think why that it's so important to offer payment plans and offer flexibility so the property manager can still have that full guarantee while the resident has the ability to live where they need to live. So as we think about the security deposit process, and we don't have to break down every nut and bolt because most people listening to this will already know what it takes to manage security deposits, but it's not an easy process. There's a lot of moving pieces. Help me understand how a solution like yours comes alongside the property manager. What's the real return on investment to use a solution like Rentable?
Yeah, for sure. So, we think about it as we have a few different value propositions. One, I would say, is time saving. So a lot of property managers today, they're dealing with things like collecting deposits, putting them in the right bank accounts, reconciling those accounts on a monthly basis, dealing with paying out interest, dealing with sending out documentation. When the tenant moves out, they're sending a check. If the check goes unclaimed, they have to turn it over to the state. So all in all, we're looking at, as I mentioned earlier, around an hour per security deposit. We eliminate that to 0 minutes. So that's a huge benefit right there. In addition to that, we're almost like insurance from a risk protection perspective where, maybe you haven't had issues with security deposits or, being sued over deposits or getting into any, issues. But the way we look at it is eventually everyone will. And that's just, the reality of the situation. And so we're able to mitigate that risk by ensuring that every step is being followed correctly. And then the final value prop, which we touched on a bit earlier, is everyone wants to provide a better experience for their residents. And we allow for that. We allow flexible payment options. We allow for electronic refunds. We are the trusted third party that manages this money for the renter. And when the renters look us up, they see that all we do is make sure that the money's being handled correctly. So it gives a peace of mind. And, as a renter, I think today, sending your money off to the property manager, and you may not know where that money goes. I think most people are doing things correctly, but you never know, right? And so as a renter, having that peace of mind is another huge benefit to using Rentable.
Yeah, and the level of work that goes behind security deposits is always interesting because on the surface level, you may think, well, it's just money in, money out. Okay, you may deduct some charges at the end, but there is so much paperwork and admin work and touching the resident profile and looking at all of those pieces along the way. It's not as simple as, oh, you accept money, you send money back, right? There's all these other pieces that a lot of people aren't thinking about. And what you have done is you've built a company around all of that you can digitize that. You have a whole modern process with automations that is much more efficient than anyone doing it on their own.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's an interesting transaction in the sense that it's a lot of times the first payment you're receiving from a resident or one of the first, and then it's the last interaction you have with them as well, getting that money back to them. When are people doing things like reviewing your business online? It's when they've already left your apartment, for example. So if you provide a really great experience, that could influence, how you show up on a review. We do a thing on sales calls sometimes, or just in general, as we pull up a property, we go to the reviews. Almost every time a 1-star review will say something about security deposits. And that just illustrates kind of the impact that, this process has. And if you do it poorly, it can be a 1-star review. And if you do it well, it can be a 5-star review. And that really does impact, your bottom line.
Yeah. And talking about it from the resident perspective, I've heard this from people in my life. I've heard it through other stories, is the number of people that are renting that assume they're not getting that deposit back, that it's going to be a battle, it's going to be challenging, it's going to be a bad experience. Like they're expecting that. And then if it does happen, if there is any type of friction, like you said, this is your last interaction. They could have had an absolute phenomenal 1, 2, 3 year lease at your property and a really good experience. And then it's the security deposit refund that trips everything up. And part of it, I do think, is kind of this old school mail you a check mentality. We don't know the address. How do we solve for things like that? Where, like you said earlier, you can make every other payment digitally, and all of a sudden this one, which is not a small dollar amount, becomes really painful. What kind of feedback do you hear from the resident themselves about the speed of getting their money back, the fact that it is digital? What do you hear?
Yeah, I mean, we hear very positive things from renters. I think people ask us why doesn't everyone use Rentable or something like, Rentable? Because at the end of the day, renters are by and large younger. They're people who are, we have stories of renters saying, even people who work at Rentable, even myself, like, you don't even have a checkbook. How do you expect me to drop off a check? I don't have a checkbook. That just illustrates the divide, right? Like, these property managers are operating in systems that are built for 50 years ago, and renters are expecting a completely different experience. And so we've had really great conversations with people about bridging that divide and creating a more, Amazon checkout-like experience or a Venmo type experience. So I think really it's been a huge positive from people, and a lot of our customers get great feedback about, providing a service like Rentable.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire industry, but when I look at the fact that so many are still treating security deposits the same way they did decades ago, I think a lot of that is tied to the fact that there's no money in security deposits, right? Meaning it's just money in, money out. Maybe you hold some, it's that risk piece where you're trying to hold money back if there's any damages, but there's no profitability there, right? So where there's not a revenue opportunity, it gets overlooked all the time. Like, why would I invest in fixing this old problem when there's nothing in it for me at the end of the day? So that is where these new solutions are great, because Rentable has figured out the math on how to actually make this scalable and make it a profitable revenue generator for your side, so you can actually offer it to the PMs. And I'll reference this. It's typically something that doesn't cost the property manager anything to implement, right? So it's not like they have to now take on a cost to fix this age-old problem. You'll fix it at no cost.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even to your point, like, that is exactly what we say, when we're talking to people. Why are you dedicating any time to this? You're not making any money. It could cost you money if you make a mistake. And there's a solution like us who is free to use. We'll make sure it's done correctly. So that's why it's been such a, we've done well, we've grown really well. And because it's somewhat of a no-brainer, especially as more and more people become aware of the risks associated with mismanagement and things like that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of mismanagement, not because anyone is necessarily at fault. It's just an old system that needs to be fixed. And a lot of the issues actually sometimes are on the renter side, meaning they're not providing the right address. There's no, good follow-up. The phone number isn't good anymore. You don't have a way to reach it. A lot of these PMs, they're required to return this money. They can't hold it. They can't keep it, right? So they want to get rid of this money as quick as possible, but it's definitely a challenge on that side of it. So you had mentioned the value in having a third party hold the money. Talk to me more about that, because I think that's very interesting, because when I'm paying for something, just like anybody, you're trying to avoid sending the money to the wrong place. You want to be making sure that you're sending the money to the right person, the right time, to make sure that things get paid. But you're saying there's actually an advantage to you being a third party and the security deposit not going directly to the PM.
Yeah. And I think it is an interesting concept. And I think, at first blush, it may seem counterintuitive, but I think the reality is, you even mentioned it yourself. When you pay a deposit today, many people don't expect to ever get that money back. They don't know where it went. They don't know when they're going to get it back. It's just a black box. We think that by having a third party insert itself and essentially be the one who makes sure things are being done correctly, and just essentially guaranteeing that the money's being held in a proper bank account, it's earning interest where it needs to earn interest, all of the right documentation is produced. All of that drives value. It creates trust where the renter understands, okay, the property manager cannot, take this money and do anything that they're not supposed to do with it. And I think that gives a level of trust. And something that, funny enough, we look to is in other countries. So I'll take the UK as an example. They have a security deposit management business that's effectively been chosen by the government to manage all tenant security deposits. And so they take it to a more of an extreme, but essentially they chose this company because they wanted to make sure that tenant deposits were being managed properly and above board. And so I think that was somewhat of an inspiration for us when we started Rentable, was seeing that, hey, this is actually happening in other places. I'm not saying that the US is going to mandate that a third party needs to do this, but the concept exists and people like it. And so we applied that similar philosophy here.
Yeah, thanks for talking me through that, because I do agree. But I like you said, it kind of first look, somebody might say, well, that's an interesting experience to pay this third party instead of the property management company directly. But to your point, it actually is a better experience because you know where the money is, you know who's holding it. It's not getting intermingled with other funds. You feel like you would have access to that money as the renter as soon as you move out, because that's the way it should. That's the way it should work. So I think it's really interesting. I did not know that's how other countries operated, so that's even more interesting. And I agree. I don't foresee our government stepping in and making these changes, but I do think it could become commonplace that this is, this third party, this mediator, basically holding the funds, ensuring that it's safe, so there's no issues there, any risk along the way. So I think that's great. Now, I do want to talk more about kind of our relationship between Rent Manager and Rentable. The reason we're having this conversation is because Rentable and Rent Manager have worked together for a number of years as what we call integrated partners, and we are launching a deeper partnership with Rentable. And what is exciting about that from our perspective is the experience that our customers will be able to enjoy having a more deeply integrated solution. But I want to hear from your side, Conor, as you look at kind of the partnership that you've had with us over the years, and kind of as we move into this new stage of a deeper partnership, what's exciting to you? What do you think the biggest advantages are?
Yeah. I mean, I think even going back to the beginning of our relationship with Rent Manager, we've always really admired how open, you guys are to innovation, letting third parties into your ecosystem. I think that's been a trailblazing, move that you all have made. And I think a lot of, others are following suit in terms of letting more integrations in and just becoming more open. So I think that really is, why we went early on. We integrated with Rent Manager and chose to really put a lot of our eggs in that basket. I think what we're excited about now is really the better experience we can provide for our customers. So we have a number of customers on our pre-existing integration. There have been a lot of things that, improvements we wanted to make that this new relationship allows us to do. And I think, we're excited to just continue basically banging the drum on security deposits being, an area that is an underlooked operational burden and a risk center, not a profit center. And so I think our goal is just to continue to get, the word out, right? And help your customers spend time in areas that actually can provide an ROI.
Yeah, and I would echo a lot of that. When I think about what we're doing and how we're solving for security deposits, we know our customers are faced with all types of challenges every day. There's a lot going on. They always talk about how property managers have to wear so many different hats. We don't want the security deposit to be one of those hats, right? We want to be able to say, you don't have to worry about this, because it is very painful. It is a lot of work. So I'm excited about the deeper partnership. Solving really operational, important challenges for our customers is something we think about every day when we think about our software and how it works and how it functions. But when we view the relationship, we get excited because of the expertise that your team brings, the level of customer support that we hear that you offer, and the resident support. And that might be something we dive into a little bit as well as we think about the resident experience. Rentable really acts as the first line of defense for PMs for anything that is related to security deposits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, another benefit to the PM, but also the renter, is they have direct access to our support email, phone number. And a lot of the time, the questions that renters have are benign. It's just when can I expect to get my money back? Prior to Rentable, you send a check in the mail. You don't know when that money's getting there, but we're able to provide much more insight into, hey, the refund was initiated at 1:15 p.m. yesterday, you can expect it this afternoon. Things like that are a huge benefit. And then even things like, hey, why did I get deducted? We're able to answer questions like that because we have direct insight into, property managers' ledgers and things like that through Rent Manager via the integration that we have. So that's a big benefit. And a lot of the times we're talking to property managers, their phone's ringing off the hook with questions like this that, it's the same answer every time. The check's in the mail. The check's in the mail. You got deducted because of late rent or whatever. And so being able to take work off of people's plate rather than put more on their plate is exactly what we're going for. And I think that's why we've really dedicated a lot of resources towards having a support line you can call and people that you can actually talk to.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's one of the things we are really excited about with this deeper built-in type partnership that we have with Rentable is that you are solving real issues at the PM level, at the resident level, because while our customers are the property management company, we think about their customers as much as we think about them. We think about the resident quite a bit. And if I'm somebody that has, thousands of dollars sitting in a security deposit waiting for a refund, I do want to know where that money is and when I can expect it back. And I want to be able to get quick, easy to understand answers. And the property manager either has to give kind of that that generalized answer every single time because they don't have visibility in the USPS. And they probably can't get back to the past resident super fast because it's probably not top of mind for them, right? To work on that. But your team is structured to do that specifically. So I think there's so many advantages there to be able to work through. The other part that I think about is with a deeper partnership is developing that deeper technical piece that provides just a better modern experience. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but that part really does mean a lot to our customers to be able to go into their primary software, Rent Manager, and see all the information they need, all the details they need, all the functionality they need, all in one place, their system of record every single day. So your team had already built a really strong integration with a lot of that core foundational pieces, and we're just amplifying it now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we're extremely proud of the integration we had built prior, but ultimately, with this new partnership, the level of access that we have from a technical perspective makes it even more seamless, right? Where things are built into the buttons and widgets that people are already accustomed to. So that's going to be huge. I think just reducing that change management, that's another, struggle as a third party is getting people to change their workflows, right? People don't want to do that. They've already learned the way that they do things. And now we're able to meet them where they're at, which I think is going to be really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the onboarding and overall experience of that change piece is really powerful because they know they want to get there. They want to be able to offload the security deposit management piece, but it can be a little bit of work to get there, and we'll definitely make it easier with the new integration. Now, when we think about the types of customers that use Rentable, help me understand at what scale, at what volume, is there any commonality among your customers where you can say we are the best fit for this profile?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, security deposits, just given the nature of the fact that they're pretty much done annually or every couple of years for a particular tenant, if you have very few doors under management, it just may not be something that's top of mind for you to want to improve upon the process. So usually we start to see those gains coming around 100 units under management, something along those lines where you're doing this stuff every month, maybe a few times a month. And so that's really where the gains come in. And then as the portfolio scales, it really amplifies the issues associated with the, managing security deposits, not only from the operational perspective, but the liability piece grows and grows and grows at a huge rate as you're managing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. So I think that's where our pitch comes in even stronger is right. As you're managing more doors, you might have millions in liability. So that's, I think a big area that we see. But at the end of the day, we have customers who have 5 units under management in areas where it's very difficult and they still see a lot of value. So at the, really we can see from 1 to 100,000 units seeing this be an issue, which people get surprised about. People think as you get much larger that they have it figured out. I personally rented from a large management company in the past and I moved out. I think it was 45 days later, I got a check in the mail. No clue why I got deducted. Like their process was not at all what you would have expected. And so just speaks to the fact that kind of no one has really solved this issue.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that's really true, and that's what I hear too. I've talked to a lot of our current customers that are using Rentable, and they are different scale of companies, and they all say the same thing. It was a pain. I didn't have a good process. I was worried about liability and the risk, and the fact that you can see value from 5 units up to 100,000 plus units. That's really something very few services, products can actually say, right? That they can scale to that level, but still help somebody with 5 units. I think it speaks volumes. And that was actually very important to us as we thought about our partnership. We've got customers that are all types of different sizes and different types of portfolio types. And we wanted to meet them where they were at as they continue to grow and be able to institute and implement a solution that can grow with them. And Rentable has definitely been that. So, as we kind of turn the corner towards the end of the episode, Conor, any last thoughts on Rentable, the value proposition, things that people really need to know about what your team is up to?
I think we touched on a lot of the value proposition. I do think viewing us as the trusted third party is an interesting angle that, we don't really talk about that much, frankly, with prospective customers. I think it's something that residents really enjoy, but I do think that's something that we'll continue to really dive into. We would like to get some metrics around things like this. Like you asked, what do renters think? Something we personally are, trying to get better at is collecting that information, right? Can we collect data points that, we can actually show people, where this is where you're improving, right? These are the things people are saying. So I think that's something on our end that we are looking to start doing more of and become the thought leader, right? For security deposits. We are the leading provider of this service. And so as a result, we think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to start to put out, thought pieces, put out data, and really show people the impact that providing a service like this, can have.
Absolutely. And I'm excited for the future. I do think this is what property managers should do and will continue to move to solutions like this for all the reasons that we've spoke about today. And I'm really excited we get to work with you and see that growth, because I think there will be a shift in the market and the property managers will see advantages. The residents will see benefits. It's kind of that classic triple win scenario where everyone involved can win because it's such a great solution. So if people want to learn more, what's the best way for them to check out Rentable?
Yeah. You can check us out at rentable.com. You can email me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Conor at rentable.com. So we're open to all channels of communication, and we'd love to talk to anyone.
Excellent. Well, we'll drop some links in the show notes. Obviously, we've got things on our website. We've got your website. There's plenty of ways to get connected with the Rentable team. Well, Conor, thanks for your time tonight. This has been great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, and thank you to our audience for listening to another episode. And until next time, keep going beyond rent.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a colleague and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the next one. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going beyond rent.